Welcome everybody to our webinar of resources and clinical research for inherited retinal diseases. My name is Diane Christian. I'm Executive Director for Partners for Pediatric Vision. I am here along with our founder and Director of Special Populations, Tori Schladen. And we also have some guests from Foundation Fighting Blindness, Shaberman and Michelle Glaze. And I will pass it on to them so that they can explain their services and all the things that they can do for us.
Great, Diane, thank you. All right, well, welcome to the webinar. We're excited to be here with the group today and to share some information about the Foundation Fighting Blindness and genetic testing, as well as some of the clinical research that's underway. I'm Michelle Glaze, Director of Professional Outreach for the Foundation Fighting Blindness. In 2004, I was diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa. So I very much understand what is the journey with vision loss. And for me, I had zero idea of what retinitis pigmentosa was prior to my diagnosis. There's no one in my family who has the disease, so it was very much a surprise. I spent a lot of time, several years in denial, wishing away the disease, just trying to hide it, ignore it. And once my vision started to get worse, I really had to face the fact that this disease called retinitis pigmentosa was going to impact my life. Through the work we do with professional outreach, our goal is to educate eye care professionals on a national level about the inherited retinal diseases and about the resources that are available. In my case, like many patients and families, I had no idea where to turn. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what was out there. And unfortunately, there are a lot of physicians who struggle with that as well. So our mission is really to help them understand how to put patients and families on a path forward when they're going through their own journeys with vision loss. So I'm delighted and honored to be in this role with the Foundation Fighting Blindness, and I'm looking forward to sharing some of those resources with all of you today. So just to give you a little bit about the Foundation Fighting Blindness, the Foundation has been around for over 50 years. The mission of our organization is to drive research to find treatments and cures for blinding retinal diseases like retinitis pigmentosa, Stargardt disease, Usher syndrome, LCA, and many others. Over the last 50 plus years, the Foundation Fighting Blindness has become the largest private funder of retinal degenerative disease research in the world. And in fact, the organization has raised nearly $900 million towards the mission. The foundation funds a variety of different types of research, lab, translational, which is moving clinical projects out of the lab and into clinical trials. We do fund clinical trials, natural history studies to better understand the diseases. We offer career development awards for up and coming clinicians who are interested in the field of inherited retinal diseases. And we also fund a patient registry and also a no-cost genetic testing program. Our goal as an organization is truly to eradicate the entire spectrum of retinal degenerative diseases. And through the work that we do, we're able to provide patients and families with the gifts of knowledge, community, and hope through all of the work that we're doing. So some of the resources that we have available are listed here on this slide for those of you who can see it. Our website is the first place that we direct folks, fightingblindness.org. On our site, you'll be able to find information about everything that we discussed today. It's just a really good place to learn about genetic testing, about clinical research. We do have a clinical trial pipeline on the page. We have a list of retina doctors on the page. We have information about events and chapters, about the inherited retinal diseases, lots of education, and then also stories to just provide some optimism and hope for the future. We also have an 888 number, as well as an email address that individuals and families can utilize if they want to contact us directly for more information or just to speak with someone. We have chapters in over 40 markets across the United States. These are volunteer-led, and in fact, we have 4 in California, 2 of which are in Orange County and Los Angeles. And the chapters serve as a way for individuals and families to connect with others who are familiar with these diseases or going through their own journeys with vision loss. The chapters are a way to get connected with events, seminars. You can learn about local resources, like Partners for Pediatric Vision and other things within the community that might help with daily life or work scenarios. So a lot of information through the chapters. That's also a place to learn about some of the research that's underway, though there are several other channels that the foundation provides for that as well. We do host a variety of events. Vision Walk is our flagship fundraiser. In fact, there's a Vision Walk going on in Los Angeles this afternoon. I believe there's another one coming up in October, but it's a way to just support the mission of the foundation to help drive research. And we have other local events, national events, regional events at the chapter level. There are a variety of seminars. And then we do some things like Music to Our Eyes or golf tournaments, things like that. So all sorts of different events that people can participate in if interested. And then we have a variety of channels through which we provide research updates. This, like we're doing today through webinars, is one, but we also host a lot of national webinars where people can hear from clinicians and researchers about the projects that they're working on as well. So lots of different ways to learn about what's ongoing. I want to spend some time as well talking today about the My Retina Tracker program, which is our no-cost genetic testing program and patient registry.
And Michelle, I just wanted to quickly add that our next national webinar will be on Saturday, November 12th, and it will include a panel of people, researchers from companies developing therapies. So 3 different companies, as well as me and our chief scientific officer, and we'll get that information out to PPV so you can share it.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Ben. So I want to take a minute to talk about the My Retina Tracker registry, which is part of our genetic testing program, but it's also a standalone entity. And what the registry is truly a bridge between the inherited retinal disease patient community and clinical research. This is a global platform. It's free. It is patient controlled, and it is a private entity. So by that I mean we do not share or disseminate any patient information. Everything in the registry remains confidential. No third parties can tap into the registry particularly. So it is a way for individuals to stand up and be seen by the research community if they have an inherited retinal disease, and also get on a path to clinical trial recruitment. Genetic testing is not a requirement to participate in the registry. The registry is open to all patients who have been clinically diagnosed with an inherited retinal disease all over the world. We certainly encourage genetic testing, but it's not required to participate in this platform. The registry is truly a way to get on the radar screen of researchers and biotech companies that are either recruiting for clinical trials or they're looking to recruit for clinical trials. The way this works is if a company is wanting to recruit patients, they can reach out to our very small team at the Foundation Fighting Blindness who has access to this information. The foundation's team will do a query by tapping into the records that are in the registry. And then what the foundation does is contact the patient or family to let them know that there is a potential clinical trial for which they qualify. It is then in the patient's hands or the family's hands to reach out to that biotech company or that researcher if there's an interest in learning more about the clinical trial or in getting involved. So it's completely, again, patient controlled, and we do take patient privacy very seriously. We currently are approaching about 21,000 active or useful records in the registry. So, we're certainly encouraging people to participate in this. If you want more information about the My Retina Tracker registry, you can visit myretinatracker.org. It's also available, there's information about the registry on our website, fightingblindness.org. So the registry is part of our genetic testing program, but I do want to talk about the holistic nature of the MyRetina Tracker program overall. This is truly a best-in-class partnership between the Foundation Fighting Blindness and our partners Blueprint Genetics and Informed DNA. Through this program, patients can obtain no-cost genetic testing and no-cost genetic counseling. And this is a way for patients and families to not only understand, but also to help manage their inherited retinal disease. Genetic testing also provides a way for you to get on the path to clinical trials, and it's a way for the foundation to continue on in the mission to drive research to find treatments and cures for blinding retinal diseases. Blueprint Genetics offers the MyRetina Tracker panel. It is a 351 gene panel, so it's very broad. And it does have to be ordered through an eye care professional. So as a patient, you would go to your eye care provider, and the provider would have to order the genetic test. The test is done through a buccal swab, usually, which is a little cheek swab inside of your cheek. And then once the DNA specimen is obtained, it's sent to Blueprint Genetics for analysis. It takes about 4 weeks for that report to be generated, and that report is sent to the ordering physician. If you are taking your kiddo, or a patient is going to a physician who is not set up through the Blueprint Nucleus portal for genetic testing, I can certainly help facilitate, helping that physician get registered. If the physician's not interested in providing genetic testing, we can help get you connected with someone in your area who is offering this test. So again, it is physician ordered. Informed DNA is our partner for no-cost genetic counseling. They are truly remarkable. I actually utilized Informed DNA for my own genetic counseling, and I cannot underscore the value of both genetic counseling and Informed DNA as a partner. They are very well versed in the inherited retinal diseases. They are very patient-centric. They're very thorough in their approach. The consultations through Informed DNA are done through a telemedicine or telehealth type of scenario, so typically over the phone. Patients and families do the consultation from the privacy of their own home, which is really nice, because some of this information can be very emotionally charged. For me, I have a son, and my RP, when I did genetic testing, it was found that my mutation was in the gene RP1. There was one allele that was clearly pathogenic, and there was another that was a variant of unknown significance. And that variant of unknown significance left a question mark around whether my RP was dominant or recessive, which had a big, that could very much impact whether or not my son would be affected. Informed DNA took a lot of time with me. Their initial consultations are anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half. They went through my genetic test results. They uncovered some other information about my parents having been tested. They did an additional step. I mean, they reached out and got my parents' genetic test results. They did some further research on that variant of unknown significance. And then they called me for a second consultation. And through the work that they did and the additional research they did, they were able to uncover and identify that my RP is recessive. My variant of unknown significance had been reclassified to likely pathogenic. And with the family history background, my parents' genetic test results, and that reclassification, they were able to share with me that I no longer have to worry about my son being affected. So I share that story just because I think it's very important to understand how valuable genetic counseling can be in understanding genetic testing results. So a very good partner that we have there. One other discussion that I just want to share and have is around why genetic testing is important. So you've heard about what the foundation can offer, the resources, no-cost genetic testing. but there may be some questions as to why. Why would I want to get genetic testing, either for myself or for my child? One important reason is because it can confirm a clinical diagnosis. Many of the inherited retinal diseases can look alike. I know for myself, I have a lot of central vision loss. So when I was first diagnosed, it was thought that I may have cone rod dystrophy. And so genetic testing is important to have a really clear understanding about what the inherited retinal disease is. Informed DNA actually did a study, and they found that in as many as 13% of cases, a clinical diagnosis changed once genetic testing was done. I'm thinking of a family locally who had a kiddo who was diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa, and their retina specialist connected them with me, and I was able to help facilitate genetic testing for that family. When genetic testing was done, it was found that child actually has LCA, and there have been a lot of opportunities that have surfaced as a result of that true genetic diagnosis. They're getting connected with some resources. There's some clinical research that's underway. So it is really important to clearly understand the genetic diagnosis in addition to a clinical diagnosis. So genetic testing can provide a more accurate prognosis for patients. It can also help to understand inheritance patterns and risk factors for family members. And then also, if a patient is interested in getting involved in a clinical trial, in most cases, genetic testing is required. There's also one FDA-approved therapy out there right now called Luxturna that certainly would require genetic testing. So with that, that's a really good lead in to Ben's portion of this presentation. He's going to be highlighting clinical trials and Luxturna. So Ben, I will pass the baton over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Michelle. And thanks everyone for joining us to learn about the Foundation's resources and some of the great research in clinical trials. I'm Ben Shaberman, VP of Science Communications, and that's what I'm about to do, is communicate some science and research. So just to give you a brief perspective on inherited retinal diseases, collectively, they affect about 200,000 people in the US. And if you extrapolate that globally, it's more than 4 million people that are affected worldwide. And a vast majority of these conditions are diagnosed in childhood or adolescence, maybe young adulthood. And they're progressive conditions. So they may start off in a milder form and then just get more severe as someone ages. The exception is the condition LCA, Leber congenital amaurosis, which usually causes pretty significant vision loss at birth or shortly thereafter. One important aspect of all these conditions is that they're almost all monogenic. And what I mean by that is each person who has an IRD, they have one gene that's defective or mutated that's causing their disease. So they're one gene diseases in that respect. The challenge is it could be one of somewhere in the neighborhood of 270 genes. So that makes these conditions really genetically diverse. You can think of the 200,000 people in the US that are affected as being in one of these 270 buckets, depending on the mutated gene causing their disease. But it also underscores why genetic testing is so important, because each mutated gene affects the retina in a different way. And so if you can understand what that gene is, then you can understand how the disease is manifesting and what therapies might address it appropriately. So again, I mentioned LCA is one of the conditions we fund research for. RP, like Michelle has, Usher syndrome, which is RP with hearing loss, Stargardt disease, which is an inherited form of macular degeneration, choroideremia, achromatopsia, and the list is longer, but I didn't have the room to put everything on this slide. So those are some of the major conditions in that 200,000 person affected population. One thing, though these conditions are obviously challenging and no one wants a retinal disease or for their loved one to have a retinal disease, it is an excellent therapeutic target. It's small. The retina is just a 0.5 millimeter thick. It's lining the back of the eye. It's neural tissue. It's an extension of the brain. And we have 2 of them. So you can treat one and compare it to the untreated retina. And even though it's neural tissue, it is outside of the skull, which makes it more accessible than, let's say, neural tissue that might be in your central nervous system or inside your skull in your brain. So a lot of really cool, potentially powerful cutting edge research is being conducted initially on the retina for the reasons I just mentioned. So Michelle mentioned early on that we've been around as an organization for 50 years. For a good chunk of our history, the research was a real slog because we were identifying genes, developing animal models, learning about how these diseases occur, how they affect the retina. But about perhaps 12 to 15 years ago, we started moving therapies into human studies. And over the past dozen or so years, we've had this tremendous surge in human research. And now there are more than 40 clinical trials underway for emerging therapies. So we're at an exciting time in that we're moving so much great research into the clinic. And one of the goals of the foundation, Fighting Blindness, is to get research to the point, maybe the doorstep of a clinical trial, or maybe get it into an early stage clinical trial, so we can attract outside investments from biotechs and pharmaceutical companies. And in recent history, we've done a great job of doing exactly that. We've attracted a lot of investment in our space, and there are now dozens of companies that are developing therapies for IRDs because we've been able to de-risk the research and show some early signs of efficacy. So currently we fund about 90 projects. Many are in the US, many are in Europe, some are in other parts of the world. The bottom line is we fund research that we feel has potential to save or restore vision. If it's good science, we don't care where it's at, we will fund it. So clearly our biggest achievement occurred in December of 2017 when a gene therapy called Luxturna was approved by the FDA. And it became the first FDA-approved gene therapy for the eye or any inherited condition. And I'm going to back up a little bit to help you understand what gene therapy is. A couple of slides ago, I mentioned that all these diseases are caused by mutations in one gene. Well, if you can augment or replace that mutated gene with a healthy gene, then you have an opportunity to potentially save or restore vision. So that's, in essence, what we mean in many cases, what gene therapy is. So Luxturna is specifically for people, kids and young adults who have mutations in a gene called RPE65. And that gene, when it's mutated, usually causes LCA, so significant vision loss really in infancy, but it can also cause RP, which comes on a little later in life and later in childhood or young adulthood. And what we saw in early stage clinical trials for this treatment was some pretty dramatic effects. Kids and young adults were putting away their navigational canes because they, again, had pretty significant vision loss. They were able to see the faces of their loved ones, which they had never been able to see. Some could even see stars in the sky or fireflies. So again, early on, Luxturna really had some impressive vision improvements. And this trial was underway at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, and they spun out a company called Spark Therapeutics to raise the money so they could get it through the entire clinical trial. And then ultimately, I think it's now 3 years ago, or it's approaching 3 years ago, Spark was acquired by Roche, a very big, several billion-dollar pharmaceutical company. So it's really exciting for us because we funded the early lab research for this project. We helped get the clinical trial off the ground at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. They spun off a company, and then Roche got involved. So this is great affirmation that gene therapy is a commercially viable way to address retinal diseases. And so now on this next slide, I'm not going to spend too much time here. I've listed a lot of other gene replacement therapies that are now in development. This is not a complete list, but it just shows the diversity of conditions and genes that are being addressed. Other forms of LCA, different forms of retinitis pigmentosa, including XLRP and some recessive RPs. There are gene therapies emerging for X-linked retinoschisis and Stargardt disease, and so much more. So this all really got off the ground after Luxturna was approved. Many of these trials came to fruition then, or at least when Luxturna was showing promise in some of the clinical trial. So I wanted to talk about some work that's being done by a company that we fund with several $1 million. And this company is called Etsena Therapeutics. And the woman pictured on the bottom left is Shannon Boy. She's a really outstanding researcher at the University of Florida that we funded for several years. She's a gene therapy expert, and she and her husband are the scientific co-founders of this company. And the first gene therapy that they got into a clinical trial is for LCA caused by mutations in the gene GUCY2D. And this is in a phase 1/2 trial. They reported some encouraging results for the first few patients. And if I understood correctly, in a couple of weeks, they'll be reporting more results as they've now treated, I think it's just about everybody in their phase 1/2 clinical trial, which is probably about 12 to 18 patients. So more data coming. Very excited by, again, the early results and the promise of this therapy. They are also working to move gene therapies into clinical trials for a condition called X-linked retinoschisis, which is a splitting of the layers of the retina, and also for Usher syndrome type 1B. As I mentioned, Usher syndrome is combined hearing loss and vision loss. And this particular form of Usher syndrome is challenging because the gene is really big. So you have to deliver it in 2 pieces. And it's a special delivery system to do that. She's developing that delivery system. It's called the dual vector delivery system. So great innovative work there. Now, a company that we actually launched ourselves that's in the gene therapy space is called Opus Genetics. And they are specifically targeting rare forms, the rarest forms of IRDs. And this company, our scientific co-founders include Jean Bennett, who is the visionary behind Luxturna, and Eric Pierce, who is really a world-renowned clinician and investigator out of Mass Eye and Ear. And so the initial targets that they're focused on are 3 forms of LCA. LCA5, which is caused by mutations in the gene laborcillin, RDH12, and NMNAT1. The LCA5 gene therapy trial, they are working to move that into a clinical trial very soon. So stay tuned. We should hear some news there. RDH12 isn't too far behind, and then NMNAT1 is the next one in line. And they have other LCA and other disease targets in mind. They just haven't announced them yet. It's a big portfolio, but this company is designed to be nimble. They have their own manufacturing facility, and hopefully this will we'll get some success with these projects and get some more LCA treatments across the finish line. Another project I wanted to talk about is being conducted by a company called Editas, and Editas develops what we call CRISPR-Cas9 or gene editing therapies. So everything I've been talking about up to this point is for gene replacement. You're replacing the whole gene with an entirely new gene. In gene editing, it's more of a molecular scissors that we're using to snip out the mutated region of the existing gene. So you're not replacing anything, you're just cutting out the bad area in the gene. And so more than a year ago, Editas launched a clinical trial for LCA caused by a pretty common mutation in the gene CEP290. When that's mutated, it causes LCA10. And they reported in the first couple of patients some encouraging vision improvements for those receiving the treatment. And I actually did an interview with one adult with this mutation who received the therapy, and he reported that he could see his food better and he's enjoying eating more. And his only problem is, because he enjoys eating so much, he's afraid he's going to put on too much weight. That was his sort of humorous but very telling comment about the impact of the gene therapy. So we've only heard reports for the first couple of patients. We need to hear more data before we get too excited, but this is encouraging. And so Editas is also developing CRISPR-Cas9 therapies for the USH2A gene, a specific region called exon 13, and also for RP caused by all mutations in rhodopsin. So stay tuned to see if they can get those into clinical trials. Now, from here on out, I'm going to talk about what we call gene agnostic therapies, meaning it doesn't really matter what the gene is that somebody has. These are designed to really slow vision loss or preserve vision independent of that mutated gene. One of the projects is being conducted by a company called Nacuity out of Dallas. We helped launch this company by investing $7.5 million in the company and its work. And they have a very powerful antioxidant called NACA, which in lab models showed great promise for slowing vision loss. So in all the retinal diseases, vision loss is exacerbated by oxidative stress, the retina's inability to process oxygen in a healthy way. So if you can mitigate oxidative stress, you have the potential to really slow down the disease. At least we believe that's the case in humans. So Nacuity launched a trial over a year ago in Australia for their molecule in people with Usher syndrome. And they're hoping, if the results are encouraging there, to launch a trial for RP in the US in 2023. So this is an oral medication. It's a molecule. It's not a gene or anything like that. And again, it is gene agnostic. And then finally, another company that we're heavily invested in is called Sparing Vision. And what they have is a therapy that's injected underneath the retina, and it's a one-time injection, and it produces a protein that keeps our cones healthy. Now, cones are the photoreceptors that help us read, recognize faces. They give us central vision. They give us color vision and vision in lighted settings. Those of us who still have our cones use our cones in most of our activities of daily living. If we're outside in really dim or dark conditions, you might not be using your cones, but otherwise you probably are. So this project we've been involved with for somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 decades, but we helped get this company off the ground a couple of years ago, and they are in the process of seeking authorization from the FDA to get a trial started, hopefully sometime early next year. And this too is a gene agnostic therapy. It's targeting people with RP, Usher syndrome, potentially other conditions, independent of the mutated gene. And to finish off, I just wanted to talk about a couple of small molecules that are in clinical trials for people with Stargardt disease. So Stargardt disease is an inherited form of macular degeneration. It usually is diagnosed in kids or young adults, although sometimes it has a later onset. But the real cause of Stargardt disease is the retina's inability to process vitamin A properly. And because it doesn't process vitamin A properly, there are these toxic byproducts from vitamin A metabolism that accumulate in the outer retina. And so these therapies that are being developed by Alkeus and Belite Bio are designed to slow or reduce vitamin A processing so that there are less toxic byproducts. Belite just launched their phase 3, and I wanted to note them because they are specifically conducting this trial for kids from the ages of 12 to 18. They think it's going to help the kids more than anybody. So we look forward to results, hopefully in a year or so on that trial. And that's about it.